Hello, people of South Africa. What can we do as Africans, to conquer, to withstand, to resist the enemy, which is the imperialist and people who colonized our forefathers, people who seized, people who deprived our resources, our minerals, uh, our means of productions, our wealth, our riches. What can we do? What can we put into place in order to overcome, to overwhelm, in order to conquer as blacks? Like, for instance, as a collectives, if we can be united, if we can synergize, if we can collaborate, if we can push one another forward, if we can support one another, if we can sequest one another, that can help us in a longer run. We can conquer our enemies, people who seized our resources, people who embezzled our land, people who purloined our resources, our minerals. The list is countless. There are quite plenty of things that were stolen from our forefathers, from our ancestors, if I could put it that way. So, what can we do? What can we put into place in order to alleviate the problem caused by those things which were taken away from us? Now it's in the palm of white people's hands. Um, Even though now we're living in a rainbow nation country, our Nelson Mandela left us with that trophy, which is Rainbow Nation. So, what can we do without jeopardizing white people's businesses? I don't want to be very political, but I'm just trying to share some few things, some segments and components, some nuts and bolts, that can a little bit help us to be ahead as a black tribe, as black people, because at some point, somewhere, somehow, we have that level of uncertainty that we are where we are right now. We are behind as a black tribe, just simply because of all of these tumultuous, mischievous, detestable things that were done to our forefathers, that were seized, that were deprived, that were purloined, that were stolen, that were taken away from our forefathers. So if we are left behind now, if we are behind, what could we do as black people? Like, for instance, I'm just going to make a very typical example, hypothetical speaking. I'm just going to talk about this thing, Nivea. I just want to talk about Nivea. Look at this thing. This is Nivea, right? I think it is not manufactured, it is not produced by a black person. Like, for instance, if you're going to look at things like Dettol, things like this, these things I've just thought they were not manufactured here in South Africa by a black person. So we should try to assess, evaluate, to examine and check all of these corporates, all of these companies which are not black owned. Let us try to alleviate supporting those companies, because we should be very considerate on where this money goes. There are black people's businesses. Like, for instance, rather than to go to ShopRite and buy a bright pack that was exported from America or wherever of these European countries, the list is countless. There are lot of things that are being exported in this country, right? Before we can further propel forward, in incentivizing buying European brands rather than local South African brands, to be precise, like, you should be very considerate. When you're holding your 100 Rand, just ask yourself, where is this money going? Before you could buy anything that is of your need, things that you might want in your household, or things that you need as a person in order to live, to survive. Things like Nivea, Dettol, which is soap and what's not, and so forth. The list is countless. But before you could propel forward in buying or purchasing anything, just ask yourself, who's the owner of this thing? Is it a black person? Is it a South African? And for me to buy that Nivea, to buy that Dettol, if it's not a local South African brand that is 100% owned by a black person, then you should be very repulsive. You should aloof yourself from buying those things. If there is no other alternative supply, let me put it that way. If there is no other alternative supply, like for instance, if there is no other soap that you can buy from a local brand that is totally owned by a black person who's an inhabitant in South Africa, then you can then go the extra mile and buy from European brands. But if you have alternatives in order to buy from black people's businesses, just go there rather than to choose the other one. Irrespective of the price, we should be very arrogant and unreasonable with our local brands, our local businesses. Like for instance, if you go to ShopRite and buy Dettol just simply because this soap, it is maybe exported, let us assume that it is exported from Europe, right? If this money doesn't go to a black person, try to aloof yourself, alleviate, distance yourself from supporting those external brands from other countries, especially from Europe, people who seized, embezzled, purloined from our forefathers. Try to think, if you're holding your 100 Rand, you are about to purchase something, ask yourself, is it money going to go to a black people's business? Right? So I'm trying to encourage, to incentivize black people to be very considerate, to be very cautious, to be very curious before they spend their money. Am I buying from a black-owned businesses, local businesses, or it's an exported businesses? Because, like for instance, if you can do that, try at all times before you buy anything, purchase anything, to be in question. Where is it coming from? Is it benefiting a black person? Is it a black person who's going to take profit from my purchase? Is it a black person who's going to collect revenue, who's going to grow richer, who's going to be wealth through my purchase? Or is it going to be white person? Because these are one of the things that makes us to be behind in terms of businesses, in terms of finances, in terms of wealth, in terms of riches, in terms of resources. That is why black man, it is behind. It is as a result of that. And we should know the repercussions as well as the ramifications of a black person purchasing, making a purchase or an order from a European brand, right? I'm not saying, guys, don't buy from European brands. Just be very considerate that if you buy from European brands, that money will circulate within the palm of the hands of white people. So that's going to give them more power to even further dominate us, to even further have control on us because of finances, because of wealth, because of resources. And remember that you are the patriot. You are a supporter of their brands, right? Even if you buy clothes, you go to Adidas, you go to wherever. I'm even wrong, guys. I should be blamed for this. I'm wearing European brands. It doesn't. There are many people who are in fashion, like David Tlale. The list is countless. There are many people who are good in clothing, especially in our country, in South Africa. But those brands are not being supported. We find ourselves as black people going to buy the Louis Vuitton, the Gucci's, the Dolce Gabbanas of this world, in spite of maybe helping a person that just started clothing shop in your local area, right? That person will be struggling just simply because black people aloof themselves from supporting that particular individual and go support outside brands. That's how we kill ourselves. So before you can make any purchase, you should be very considerate. You should be very cautious of where this money goes. Make sure that if you make a purchase, it's a black person that collects the revenue. It's the black person that profits. It's a black people's business that profits from that particular business. So if we could be very cautious and considerate in those minor things, I think at some point, somewhere, somehow, we can have a way of paving to be ahead in terms of finances and wealth I've just thought I've made myself clear. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely one.